Are you a startup founder considering launching or relocating your business in Cambridge? What if Cambridge, one of Europe's leading deep tech hubs, was easier to access than ever? Introducing Launch Cambridge, a powerful new initiative bringing together trusted local experts in workspace, legal, finance, banking and relocation, giving you a seamless, de-risked path into the UK's most dynamic innovation ecosystem. Visit launchcambridge.com for more information.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Faye. So another delightful week runs by. James, how was your week last week?
Time's flying by, isn't it? It's crazy. I didn't get a chance to spend as much time as I'd planned to at London Tech Week, but I did get along to the celebration of the first anniversary of the Barclays Eagle Lab at Shoreditch. So it was nice to catch up with a few folks down there. I also jumped in the car and went over to Oxford. I went to visit Oxford Edge to learn more about their operation and more about the Oxford ecosystem. That was really interesting. There's also a lot of podcast stuff going on behind the scenes. For listeners that can count, you'll see the episode numbers are ticking up towards 200. So
James,
we've got some stuff planned.
You can't say that.
I'm sorry.
Can we please apologise to our listeners who evidently
I don't want to
can
insult
count?
our listeners.
No.
We have to cherish every one of them, don't we?
Yeah, but go on, carry on. 200th episode.
Yeah, so that's coming up very shortly. So we've got lots of exciting things planned around that. So keep tuned if I've not upset you all now. How about you? How was your week?
I was also at London Tech Week, possibly there for a bit longer than you. So I had 2 solid days at the Global R&D and Investment Summit. It was a brilliant event, really expertly organised by Midlands Innovation. It was 2 jam-packed days of being on. I literally got to the point where can I go and hide and not speak to anyone? No,
it's exhausting being positive, isn't it?
I'm always positive, so of course it's not exhausting. Yes. But no, it was really good. Lots of conversation. There were so many public bodies represented there. Your councils, your mayoral combined authorities, different groups, associations. So it was really interesting. And obviously it was university-led because it was about R&D and science investment. So very broad perspective of innovation systems, which for me is super useful as we're still forming what the Cambridge-Manchester partnership is. Also, I met loads of people from the Department of Business and Trade and the Office for Investment. So although we're not quite ready for those conversations yet, it's just, you know me, I love increasing my Rolodex. So it was really good. And then the rest of the week was, go on, sorry, James.
I was to say, do you think our younger listeners are going to understand what a Rolodex is? Is that even a reference anymore?
Yeah, it is. I do test it every so often just to make sure that I'm not a dinosaur, which I've also found out you're not supposed to say certain things anymore. Being a dinosaur is one of them. So maybe Rolodex fits in that. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, carrying on. What else? So rest of the week, just a normal work. I did go and meet the entire Cambridge Wireless team, which was really lovely. We just planned a bit of a social lunch. And that was really great just to catch up to everyone. And we took the opportunity to do some extra planning on Cambridge Tech Week, which I know we're both quite actively involved in personally as well again. And honestly, the highlight of my week, and anyone who sees me out and about at networking events knows that I love my name badges. And I got some new name badges. So honestly, I'm just super excited about that.
I had a massive collection of lanyards and things like that, and I chucked them all away. There was hundreds of them. Do you keep all yours?
I used to. They did all get filed in the BIN when I moved offices. So yeah, I just now have these really lovely professional magnetic badges, I'll have you know.
Very nice. So we got a packed news week this week, haven't we? So should we move on and talk about the news? Cambridge Enterprise have launched a new programme called LEAPS, which is to globalise Cambridge startups. The idea is to embed Cambridge startups within major global innovation hubs. London is the first city with 3 companies set to be placed into its AI, fintech and life sciences ecosystem, alongside partners Phoenix Court, Bolderton and the Bio Innovation Institute. An advisory board featuring names from Microsoft, Novo Holdings and Lazard will select the companies on a competitive basis. And CEO Jim Glasheen says London is just the beginning, and you can go back to our episode 147 to listen to our interview with Jim.
Next up, we have Cambridge MP Daniel Zeichner, who visited cleantech startup Sampler at Cambridge Science Park, who is backing calls for natural polymer technology to become a £4.2 billion UK industry, supporting 35,000 green jobs. Daniel is pushing for natural polymers to be regulated separately from plastic, arguing that the UK can lead in sustainable materials. I think listeners will remember Sampler's plant protein-based technology, Morrow, matches plastic performance but biodegrades naturally, and it's the result of 15 years of University of Cambridge research. CEO Alexandra French says it's proof plastic can be eliminated at source entirely, and you can go back and hear more from Alexandra in episode 142.
Google.org and Google DeepMind are investing $25 million over 5 years into an AI genomics consortium with the Wellcome Sanger Institute in Cambridge. The partnership will be built on high-quality AI-ready genomic data sets to power next-generation biological discovery models. With the goal of making biology more predictive, it builds on an existing relationship between the two organisations.
Next up, we have Cambridge engineering AI firm SecondMind, who have struck a landmark deal with Sumitomo Corporation Automotive Engineering, SCAE, in Japan, becoming SCAE's first non-Japanese technology partner. SCAE will offer SecondMind's model-based engineering software to Japanese OEMs and Tier 1 vehicle manufacturers, with both CEOs Toshimine Yamanoi and Gary Brotman flagging it as a transformative step for vehicle design and development in Japan. And I'm slightly traumatised that our conversation with Gary was way back in episode 50, so we really should get him back on.
And speaking of previous guests on the show, our next story is from Cambridge biotech Houghton Bio, who have signed an MOU with Utopia World Investment in Oman with Wakard International, who are Oman's first dedicated biodiesel refinery set to offtake its algae-derived oil. The University of Cambridge-rooted technology targets hard-to-abate sectors like aviation and shipping, with first Oman deployment expected in 2027. CEO Manshu Agrawal calls it a key step from UK innovation to commercial scale.
That's a really exciting progress. It's a very difficult market, so well done to the team over there at Houghton Bio. And finally, we've got a couple of pieces of news that have national impact but relevance to Cambridge and our audience, so well worth sharing. First of all, Business Secretary Peter Kyle and Chancellor Rachel Reeves last week unveiled a new concierge service and visa reimbursement scheme to help the UK's fastest growing firms attract global talent and scale up. The goal is nurturing the UK's first $1 trillion company. The tiered support service builds on existing backing from firms like Oxford Quantum Circuits, Quantexa, Elliptic and Wave, and quantum firm TreeQ, which recently relocated from the US to Cambridge.
Technology Secretary Liz Kendall unveiled the government's AI hardware plan at London Tech Week, with Cambridge firms ARM and Common AI among the lead players. Highlights included £750 million for the National AI Supercomputer by 2030, £120 million for a chip innovation programme, and £150 million from the British Business Bank via a new fund led by Silicon Valley investor Playground Global, which is opening its first non-US office in the UK. Cambridge-based Common AI will help deliver an expanded scaling inference hub, and ARM joins the skill pipeline through a new strategic government partnership.
Brilliant. Lots of news for everyone there, so I hope that's useful to you. And now we're going to move on to this week's episode, where James, you caught up with Dan Thorp, CEO of Cambridge Ahead, to talk about the results from their recently published CamEO report.
So, Dan, welcome to Cambridge Tech Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much. Great to be on, first time. So I'm Dan Thorp. I'm the Chief Exec of Cambridge Ahead. Cambridge Ahead is a membership organisation representing major employers across the Cambridge ecosystem. And what we do is work with government so that government can understand the Cambridge economy, government understands what the Cambridge economy needs, in order to grow further and then support the implementation of those things that are going to support the good growth of Cambridge.
Yeah, long overdue to get you on, actually. Timing is perfect because you've just delivered a great piece of research, which is called the Cambridge Economic Overview. I believe it's going to be an annual edition and an annual format kind of series. It would be great to delve a little bit deeper into that. What was the ambition behind the report and what kind of gap are you trying to fill with this research?
Our ambition with this, the CamEO report, as we call it for short, is for it to be authoritative, be in-depth, and to be an impactful annual summary of the Cambridge economy and what the Cambridge economy needs in order to deliver more, to continue to succeed. So going back to our mission being engaging with government and helping government nationally and locally to get it, we could describe the ambition as if the Chancellor of the Exchequer was to pick up the CamEO report. That would be the single best briefing they could get on the Cambridge economy, why the Cambridge economy matters. And if they were able to wave their magic wand and implement the recommendations we've made in that report, that would get you 80% of the way there in securing the growth potential of Cambridge. No one report could cover it all, but we want this to be the go-to place to understand the Cambridge economy and to set out what actions would support the further good growth of the Cambridge economy more. I don't know that the Chancellor has read it, but he did like it on LinkedIn. But I will take that as a good signal.
Absolutely. As you say, it's just packed with data, packed with insights, and it's honest as well, right? Let's start off with some of the challenges. The report highlights that employment growth has slowed. And actually, when you look at the data, we're down from 4.8% the year before, a 0.5% drop compared to last year. The knowledge-intensive sector, which maybe just to pause there, you could maybe give us a definition of how you describe the knowledge-intensive sector. So its first annual employment decline since you started tracking the data in 2011. What's going on? What's the market look like right now?
Yeah, the knowledge-intensive sector, that brings together industries that are in what you would call the knowledge economy. So tech, life sciences, advanced manufacturing, professional services. Yeah, and there are some big, important things going on in the economy right now, which is why we thought this year was the right time to launch this new annual publication. And I think a lot of what is happening won't come as a surprise to your listeners because it's what people are living and experiencing. We know that the last year, in fact, probably the last 18 months to 2 years, have been a challenging time for the national economy, the UK economy, and internationally. And Cambridge is not immune to that. So exactly as you said, James, since we've been tracking data on the Cambridge economy, this is the first period where we have seen those challenges come through in the data in the way that they have been. And that is true across different parts of our economy in Cambridge. I think there's a particular life sciences aspect to what's been going on. But the report also talks about the positivity of that. And I say positivity because it is relative. And the report paints Cambridge in the picture of the national economy. And I think in a nutshell, if you were investing in or working in innovation sectors anywhere in the country, Cambridge is probably top of the list still of the places that you would want to be doing that. So Cambridge is not immune to the challenges facing the national and international economy, but in relative terms, it is still performing very strongly and is still the place in the UK for many of these activities.
Yeah, I think the thing I love about the report is it gives us the quantitative data to back up the qualitative data that we pick up from the conversations that we have with founders on the podcast. We're getting that feedback of constrained financing for earlier stage companies. One thing that's cropping up pretty much every week is the conversation around AI and how the adoption of AI is going to potentially reduce the number of people within companies moving forward. Is it too early to see those trends coming through the data that you're collecting, or do you think that also plays into some of this?
I think it is too early. it is too early to see the AI impact coming through in the data. There are signals, exactly as you suggest, that something may be changing, but it's too early to see that coming through in hard data yet. It is definitely something we will be keeping an eye on. It's something I expect to feature more prominently in the analysis next year when we do this report. We have something called our Young Advisory Committee in Cambridge Ahead. So this is for younger workers under 35 in major employers across Cambridge. We were talking there about the work they do for us in helping highlight how the world of work is changing. So back in the pandemic, that was around hybrid working, remote working. But right now, that's about the impact of AI, particularly on younger workers. So they were talking about it there, as I fully expect. It's something that we will focus on more, see more, and be talking about more this time next year.
Yeah. Okay. And as you say, there are some positive signs out there. Obviously, we talk to a lot of startup founders on the podcast, so let's switch the conversation to the startup piece. So some good news that there was 281 equity deals between 2020 and 2024 in the Cambridge area, which is the highest of any UK location outside of London. And 3 of the 5 biggest UK biotech venture capital deals in the first quarter of this year were Cambridge companies. However, the flip side of that is the birth rate of new companies has fallen by nearly 50%. So we were averaging 1,129 companies between 2013 and 2019, and that's dropped down to 620 between 2024 and 2025. So what's your kind of narrative over that data? Is this just the impact of better early stage support, so it's a quality over quantity thing, or do you have other kind of views on that?
Firstly, it's lovely to speak to someone who's clearly read the report. It's so much detail. Yeah, I don't think that there's just one narrative here about what's going on in startups. Exactly as you've just said, James. Some metrics are really strong, particularly when you look at Cambridge's relative performance compared to other places. And in the report, we have relationships with Centre for Cities, example where some of that relative data comes from. But if you compare Cambridge to itself, and we do that through the measurement of the birth rate of new companies, part of the long-standing data collaboration we've had with the Centre for Business Research at Judge Business School, on that measure, I think there is cause for concern that something is going on. So the birth rate of new companies has been declining steadily and notably. We are going to do a deep dive into that because we know it is happening, or we can have good confidence that's what's happening. We don't know much about the nuance of that or the reasons for that. We know it's happening in KI, knowledge intensive companies, so in the sectors that are most important to your listeners. But we don't know whether that decline matches what's happening across the nation as a whole or other comparable cities. And we don't know the root causes of it. It's something that I think we should care about understanding. And so we are going to undertake a deep dive on the back of this report to understand it more. Okay,
that's something we'll definitely track and maybe get you back on to talk about. Would that analysis happen ahead of the next annual report, or would that be wrapped up into next year's edition of the report?
I think we will do it before the next annual report. I think we'll do it over the course of this year. So I'll definitely keep in touch with you about that.
Okay, excellent. So looking at Cambridge's national impact, and obviously this is of particular interest to Faye in her new role with the Cambridge to Manchester partnership, the report describes Cambridge and Manchester as the 2 highest performing UK city regions for investment outside of London, and says the ties between them are deepening. What does that relationship actually look like in practice? And in a similar vein, how is the Oxford to Cambridge corridor also developing?
I would observe real similarities in both of those examples, the Manchester-Cambridge partnership and the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor, in that both of those I have seen as bottom-up initiatives. They are things that have come from industry seeing industry being connected across those places and policy following that. They come bottom up from the economy. So in the Manchester-Cambridge example, what does it look like in practice? It looks like the fact that second biggest employment location in the UK outside of Cambridge is Manchester. Pragmatic Semiconductors, genesis of that business was in Manchester, and they moved to Cambridge to found and scale Pragmatic. When Roku decided to invest and scale in the UK, they chose Manchester and Cambridge as the two places to do it. Cambridge Angels helped found and get going Manchester Angels. So what I'm saying is that there is a natural economic connection between Manchester and Cambridge that has been growing from the bottom up over time. And I think what's happening now, and the work that Faye is involved in alongside many of us, is it's the formalizing and investing in that relationship to maximize it, to build it out, to get more from it. But its genesis is in something that's happening because there is a very real connection between the economies and the two places. And I see that in a very similar way in the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor, where business, industry, academia have been working and collaborating across that corridor, have seen the benefit in that region being a thing. And that has been the genesis for government and policymakers coming in to maximise that and build out that opportunity.
Yeah, indeed. And as you describe, everyone's very excited about the future vision for the region. So what's going to hold Cambridge back from grabbing this opportunity? What are the constraints as you see them?
We outline a number of those in the report, and that builds on many years of our work, really. If we come back to the reasons that people are employing in Cambridge, the reasons that businesses, innovators, entrepreneurs and investors are here, I think more often than the number one reason people cite is talent, the talent pool that exists in Cambridge. And what limits that? What limits people's ability to live and work in Cambridge? As we all know, it is the unaffordability of housing. It's the unavailability of good transport connections. And it can also be things like routes to accessible talent visas. So many of the constraints for future growth of the Cambridge economy come back to what are the things that are going to support talent to be here or not, whether that talent is homegrown or has come from elsewhere. And so transport, housing, the things that unlock housing site are top of that list, really. It was a real positive moment, as we are recording yesterday, was the day where government made a range of announcements about government's commitment to Cambridge, including the creation of a development corporation for Cambridge. 3 years ago, Michael Gove, when he was in government at the time, announced his intention to massively increase the size of Cambridge with something like 250,000 new homes. At that point, Cambridge Head very quickly convened to say, if you are going to do anything to grow Cambridge, you need to focus on the infrastructure that enabled that growth to happen. And so yesterday was a really pleasing moment in that government's announcements said explicitly if this is an infrastructure first project and did not include a target for housing numbers. So infrastructure that enables people to live affordably and travel well into Cambridge would be top of that constraint. We also see in the data and in speaking to businesses more and more that access to scaling capital, coming back to our earlier conversation, has risen up the agenda as a constraint to the growth of the Cambridge economy. So you will see in the report a number of recommendations, ways in which we think government should work to increase the availability of scaling capital. And then the last thing I would draw attention to on this topic is I am hearing more and more from our members, from those I speak to across the Cambridge economy, that there's something about the overall conditions of the UK as a place to build and scale a business, the competitiveness of the UK, the global positioning of the UK. I think government hears that. Chancellor's words yesterday definitely recognised that point, but it's something we draw out particularly in the report as an area that government really needs to care about and should work with Cambridge, because the concentration of founders and scalers in Cambridge, to really understand and respond to those kind of competitiveness issues.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And obviously we're moving at pace through some deep topics here. We'll definitely make sure that the download links for the report are in the show notes for this episode. What was really pleasing to see, there's a section in the report that's dedicated to actually the quality of life of people living in the area, which can be either ignored or completely undervalued in a lot of economic analysis. So do you want to walk us through what your discoveries and your insights around the quality of life issue for people in the region?
Definitely. Quality of life has been something we talked about from the very outset of Cambridge Head as needing to be the measure of success. So we have said, we have advocated specifically that the measure of Cambridge's success should be quality of life, should not be economic output. And actually, we had a launch event for our report last week, and naturally, so without steering, quality of life became by far the biggest topic that was talked about across the panel, and the collective compression of people across the Cambridge ecosystem who focus on the lived experience of being in Cambridge, how well people can live here, really came through strongly. So that's the kind of overall positioning of quality of life in this discussion and the Cambridge growth agenda. This year in our CamEO report, what we did was try and focus in on where the most important quality of life issues are, where the data takes us. And the data, and some of this we commission in partnership with local authorities, some of which we've brought together ourselves. The data, I think, is particularly compelling when it comes to young people, the experience of young people in terms of finding somewhere to live, their access to work, and also issues like mental health. So in the report, what we are suggesting is that efforts in Cambridge to support the quality of life of young people, particularly to help young people to access and enjoy work, that is already something that is unifying our ecosystem, and we should double down on those efforts, and Cambridge Head wants to play its part in those efforts. And that ranges across a few things. For example, the Development Corporation, which has just been announced, having a focus on housing that is appropriate and affordable for young people. We talk about the work of Form the Future, which you'll be very familiar with in our report, the need to secure long-term funding for Form the Future so we continue. And we talk about the relatively new Included programme. So actually my colleague at Cambridge Head, Andrew Lim, wrote a report on inclusive growth in Cambridge. And the big conclusion that Andrew made was that there is a lot of good activity happening across Cambridge. It just isn't particularly coordinated or focused in the way that we do in other areas. And Included, which is the programme convened by the City Council, but one that lots of people are playing a part in, is an effort to coordinate and focus support. So in the report, we see that as a way to really respond to the quality of life issues and the quality of life needs in our place. And just to finish up on this point, in my view, it's inequality, quality of life. It's a challenge that kind of lends itself to soundbite, but the solutions are actually not quick or easy. So it's something that requires consistent effort. It's something that requires empathy, understanding, working with community, and that's where we're very keen to change that we're positioning ourselves to help.
We're covering a lot of ground very quickly here, but as we bring the conversation to a close, if there was one finding in the report that you would want Cambridge founders and investors to act on, which finding would that be?
We go out and ask businesses, business leaders, a sort of sentiment test. And there was quite a common view that came back to us that there's a sort of wait and see sentiment in kind of boardrooms and decision-making places at the minute. There's a kind of wait and see caution in the economy. That's not surprising given the headwinds that the national economy is facing. What I would say, though, is the report is very clear that in relative terms, Cambridge's fundamentals, the assets of Cambridge really become very pronounced when you look at it compared to other places and a range of different measures. In recent weeks, we've had some really positive announcements about investment into Cambridge from various firms and entities and institutions. So the one finding I think would be that there is no other place quite like Cambridge to innovate and to scale tech companies and knowledge-intensive companies. And really the timing right now with the commitment the government is making, there should be the level of confidence to overcome that, the wait and see caution.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. It's a great report, tons of data, tons of insights. How do people find it and how do they get involved in Cambridge Ahead?
Yeah, so Cambridge Ahead, you could come to our website, you could look on our socials. So we are on LinkedIn, Blue Sky and X, and the small Cambridge Ahead team is based on Station Road. So if you find yourself in Station Road and want to pop into WeWork and speak to us, I'm really very happy to do that.
Fantastic. Like I say, it's a long overdue appearance and we'll be definitely following up to monitor progress on some of those additional points that you're going to dive deeper into, and look forward to maybe making this an annual thing and getting you on each year the report's published.
Sounds great. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Today's show was produced by Joe Donaghy of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show. Technology moves fast, and now so can you. Discover Polestar, the all-electric performance brand vehicles redefining how we drive. Precision engineering, minimalist design, and software that evolves with you. Experience it at Holden Group in Norwich and Bury St Edmunds, or let us bring the test drive to your door. Proud sponsors of the Cambridge Tech Podcast. Polestar, electric performance redefined. Discover at holdengroup.co.uk/Polestar.